With 95 lakh teachers across 15 lakh schools in India, India's education system can best be described as one of the most complex in the world. And picking one school from this lot can be quite daunting. When it comes to identifying the right school for our children, most information that is publicly accessible about learning quality in schools gets limited to the grade 10 and grade 12 board results. Hence, there's a critical need to create a reliable solution for information on learning outcomes across schools, which empowers parents to make informed decisions on school choices. Today, I have the pleasure of hosting Aashti Zaidi Hai, CEO of Global Schools Forum, to discuss this theme. The Global School Forum recently published a report called All Hands on Deck for SDG 4, which looks specifically at how collaboration between government and non-state actors can help to accelerate progress towards SDG 4 of ensuring quality education for all. The report further looks at various case studies to analyze diverse initiatives that have successfully fostered engagement between state and non-state providers. One of the case studies featured focuses on the work that Central Square Foundation does in India. We will discuss the collective need for government and education system as a whole to ensure learning outcome data is publicly available for parents and the community at large. Hello and a very warm welcome, Aashti.
Thank you so much.
It's a real pleasure to have you with us for this episode of Edge Talks. And let me first start by thanking you for including Central Square Foundation as one of the feature stories in your All Hands on Deck report. My first question then is that could you tell us about how this report came into being and how did you decide to feature our work as a part of that report?
Sure. First of all, thanks so much for inviting me for this. I've been working closely with the CSF team for many years now. In order to answer your question, maybe I thought I'd just take a step back and give you a little bit of a background about GSF. So our mission is to activate a community of non-state education actors that are committed to improving education at scale for children from low-income families across low and middle-income countries. And as you know, Shaveta, non-state education writ large, whether it means NGOs providing education or affordable private schools, faith-based schools, continue to be quite a big sector in India, but also across the globe. So that was kind of the first reason for wanting to do the study. The second is that the non-state sector is quite a vibrant sector, and approximately 86% of innovations in the education space arise from the non-state sector. And finally, governments across the globe are partnering with non-state actors in a variety of ways, as you're aware. And so for us, it was really critical to think about how we as GSF can build a more collaborative environment where both governments and non-state actors are working together. In many countries, these two systems often operate in parallel. It can be contentious, the relationship sometimes. And what we wanted to do with All Hands on Deck was to create a set of tools and resources and case studies, including Central Square Foundation's work in this area, that can provide a boilerplate guidance and some sort of template to organizations that are interested in thinking about how they can support governments and have a seat at the table so that policies and programs are, take into account the voice, the collective voice of the non-state sector more effectively. And most importantly, so that non-state actors and governments can work collectively together to achieving national education goals. So that's the first part of your question. And to your second question, why CSF? So as I mentioned right at the outset, you guys are a real pioneer in the education space in India. And we've been following your work for many, many years. And in fact, the work that you've done on governance, both to kind of strengthen, taking a system strengthening perspective, both vis-a-vis the public system, government schools, but also importantly, the affordable private school space and the non-state space in India. Because for us, and I think for you as well, these are both integral parts of the Indian education system, and they need to work together collectively so that all children in India have access to quality and safe education. And so for us, the work that you've done in this space, whether it is the evidence that you built through the report that you wrote on the APS sector, the policy engagements that you're doing around trying to strengthen the regulatory environment, trying to create opportunities for parents to have better information. All of those are pieces that we wanted to use as examples of how one can build a system that brings all hands on deck.
Yeah. No, thank you. Those are very kind words regarding our work. I do feel that in the context of New Education Policy 2020, which also lays out a very ambitious vision for looking at the sector holistically, a lot of these innovations are well timed in the Indian context.
Absolutely. And what we were wanting to do was to really shine a light on how your work, and your work has evolved in this space, right? You've responded to the NEP and are taking a kind of a much more sort of system strengthening perspective to this work now, which I really do appreciate. And we've signaled that in the case study. And so we really hope that by conducting this case study and pulling from the case study into the toolkit, we can try and plant seeds for other organizations to learn from your work.
The case studies that you featured also include 3 examples from Africa. Curious to know, how did you go about identifying these? And also, if you could tease out, how do learnings from that tie into your larger work on non-system actors working in partnership with the system?
Yeah, great question. So we were looking through this process. We did quite a bit of research into identifying different initiatives across the globe where a combination of non-state actors were able to successfully build partnerships and work collaboratively with government. And in that regard, Central Square Foundation was one of the featured case studies. We also looked at different kinds of other partnerships. So we looked at RELI, which is the Regional Education Leadership Initiative, which is an East African regional initiative of a variety of non-state actors that are working together with several East African governments, how they built that, how they built trust with governments. We looked also at Lagos State. So in Lagos, for example, 70% of children are educated in the affordable private school space. This relationship has not always been a comfortable one. It's been quite contentious. So we wanted to trace how that relationship has developed and evolved over time. So that was the 3rd case study. And then the 4th one was looking at an initiative in Côte d'Ivoire called TREC, which is an initiative that brings together the cocoa growers, the cocoa growers industry, so private sector with philanthropy, with government, and with evidence and research organizations. And so those 4 sets of partners working together to improve access to quality education in government schools in Côte d'Ivoire. So each one was a slightly different set of partners with a slightly different goal. All of them used a combination of advocacy, evidence generation, and really a lot of kind of stakeholder trust building to try and advance and build this sort of more collaborative environment in their country or region, or as it were in the case of Lagos in the state.
Aashti, I'd now like to touch upon a not always easy topic, which is the access to information on learning in the hands of the parents and the community. You know that this data is not always easily accessible, especially when, the large scale assessments, there is not a public disclosure of it, and that sharing of information is not transparently done across all stakeholders. What role do you see in allowing the public disclosure of learning outcomes for large-scale school-based assessment? And how do you think this will help in solving the information gap on school quality in the hands of parents and community as decision makers?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a complicated area, as you mentioned. For us, information is power. And we know that parents often don't have information about the quality of schools readily available to them in digestible, easy to understand formats. There aren't too many examples across the global south writ large where this information is easily accessible. And so really do applaud the efforts of Central Square Foundation in this area. And I know it's obviously, this is an area that takes time and is complex, as you pointed out. I think information is on learning is important, on learning outcomes. But I also think that strengthening the regulation of non-state schools and holding non-state schools more accountable to deliver to some level of minimum standards, so that both governments, parents, and ultimately students and children and youth have information at their disposal so that we can ensure that all schools are safe learning spaces for children. And so I think the piece around providing, using national assessment data, as you point out, is a very powerful source. It's not easy to do that, and it's not easy to distill that information and make it available to all the stakeholders that I mentioned. But I think for that to happen and for regulatory systems to also be strengthened alongside providing parents with this kind of information is valuable. But I would encourage that we don't take a narrow lens where we're only looking at learning, learning as it often is now looked at just in terms of foundational literacy and numeracy. But we also think about, for example, school safety. We also think about access to sanitation, safe and clean sanitation. So we also look at some other indicators that are pointing to kind of whole child development and the kinds of skills that we would like our children to have. So I think all of these are important, but of course, some of them are easier to measure than others.
So in your view, a more comprehensive set of indicators, of course, including learning outcomes, but not limiting that only to the cognitive, also the non-cognitive, and like you said, some essential input metrics like sanitation.
Absolutely. So when we think about, providing information to parents, it is extremely challenging to do that in a way that is politically salient and is easily accessible for parents. We learned about some work it was kickstarted some while ago in Lagos, Nigeria, where they are developing a school rating system. It started with just the affordable private school space, but I believe the intention is to roll it out for all schools, private and public. And to rate them on a range of metrics, most importantly linked to learning outcomes, as you said. This is not to be punitive towards the schools, but to also provide them with some guidance on how they can improve their rating. And if I remember correctly, the government was considering how they might incentivize. This might incentivize schools that are not registered currently and operating kind of under the radar to come forward, be agreed to kind of receive their rating and then get some kind of incentive from the government, some kind of small financial incentive from the government so they can bump up their rating with some guidance on how to do so. This is quite a nice way, I think, to make the data that we have on the non-state sector more holistic. So we know exactly how many schools there are, but also have a way to benchmark the quality of information that we have on them. How well are they providing education to students? And then think about how we provide that information to parents so that they can make an informed choice for their children.
Uh, So your work in Global Schools Forum calls out system strengthening as one of the key pillars of any reform for education learning outcomes. And you know that our work at Central Square Foundation has always been in deep partnership with both the central and the state government. Curious to learn from your experience, how did your work call out the importance of system strengthening? And what would be some of the learnings you think are relevant from our perspective?
Sure. So for us, and in setting up Global Schools Forum, 7.5 years ago, my intention was never to create a community for the sake of creating a community. So our community now extends to 117 organizations across 60 plus countries. Between them, these organizations run or support over 250,000 schools and ECD centers, reaching 21 million children. It's a sizable number, but that's just a tip of the iceberg. And the reality is that over 50% of our community is already partnering with government in some way. So for us, GSF has always been a way to think about how we can tap into the innovation, the ideas that come from this community that can actually ultimately result in systems change, given that many of these organizations are already working so closely with the governments in their countries of operation. So it's not about how they themselves are strengthening their own schools, but what we can learn from what they're doing within their organizations that can ultimately result in building stronger education systems in the countries in which they operate. So that's very, very core to our DNA and has always been core to our DNA. And I think that's why the All Hands on Deck project is so dear to us, because in the current education landscape, governments don't have the financial resources, most of them, or sometimes the technical capability to deliver to the Sustainable Development Goals in education by 2030 alone. We do need to take an all hands on deck approach. And what that requires is that civil society works alongside government, works alongside NGO schools, faith-based schools, and others to really help us have a transformative impact on children's education. And what it means really is that the work of GSF is not then just about strengthening those organizations, but about how we're really working alongside yourselves and others in this journey that we're all on together.
Aashti, how is the Global Schools Forum now planning to use the All Hands on Deck report across government and non-government actors across the world to enable better learning outcomes for all children?
So the All Hands on Deck toolkit, case studies, and resources are now obviously available on our website, free for use and for download. The key, as you know, is how we can ensure that they're getting into the right hands. So we're just at the outset of the journey and are seeking partners that think that they might have a use case for these tools. So if indeed anyone that's listening in to our conversation is interested in how they can have build more collective voice and engage and partner with government more effectively as a non-state actor, as someone from the affordable private school space, they should absolutely reach out to us. We are looking for test cases, for situations that we can test and pilot and indeed iterate some of these materials. I'm sure we can continue to strengthen what we've developed. It is a process of continuous improvement for us. On the other hand, we are also in the midst of concluding a joint piece of research we've done with UNESCO on strengthening the regulation of non-state actors. And for us, these two pieces actually go very much hand in hand.
Yeah.
So on the regulation front, we're interested in disseminating the key findings from that report once it sort of goes through all of the due process within UNESCO. And then are also looking to explore with a couple of national or subnational governments that are interested in how they can take some of those findings and build a more robust regulatory system in their country so that non-state actors are both held to account, but also supported. And then through all hands on deck are able to have a voice when it comes to policy and programming decisions that government makes. So for us, these two pieces are very much sort of two hands that need to sort of work together.
To wrap up our discussions, we are trying a fun spin with the rapid fire. So ready when you are.
I'm ready.
How can transparent school learning data empower parents to make better decisions for their children's education?
This is absolutely important. There's lots of evidence from around the globe that providing parents with easy information is very empowering. So yes, agree wholeheartedly in doing so, but there are some challenges as we've spoken about.
And in what ways is publicly disclosing this learning outcome data beneficial to the students?
I think as long as the data isn't, as long as it's low stakes or zero stakes for the students, it can only be a source of power. Information is power. And if schools are able to use that information where they're given support on how they can improve, where areas have been indicated that they can improve and they can sort of qualitatively improve the quality of where, for example, things might be lacking, then I think it's a win-win for everybody, parents, students, and schools as the key stakeholders in this.
What do you think is one important lesson that India can learn from the examples that you've seen in Africa?
There have been a couple of, within the GSF community, some powerful RCT data that's been emerging. So one of our members, Building Tomorrow, operates in Uganda. They run a program called Roots to Rise, where they take fresh graduates from college that are coming out of university as volunteers to go back to their local communities and work in schools to bring out-of-school students back into school and to also support school teachers to ensure that students are learning. This provides a pipeline into the teaching profession, but also provides some kind of civic engagement for youth to really be involved in the education system.
And lastly, what's one good thing about the Indian education system that you would like to highlight?
I think that there is a lot happening in India. The world is looking to India. I can't tell you how many times our members that are based, as I said, in 60 plus countries have said, please have your next annual meeting in India. The space here is so vibrant, and obviously CSF is one of the key players, but there's so much choice, there's so much innovation, there's so much to learn vis-a-vis EdTech, vis-a-vis state-level reform. The government, the way that government is really engaging on the foundational literacy and numeracy reforms, and you know, with the new sort of national education policy, we're really seeing all of that accelerate at a rapid pace. So I think all eyes are on India, and we're hoping that we can bring our community here to spend some time and learn from what's happening here.
Oh, we look forward to that. I think, like you said, truly exciting times, especially in the context of the National Education Policy 2020 and Nipun Bharat. And I do feel, I say this on behalf of everyone in India, that those exciting times also come with a high responsibility to be able to now deliver learning outcomes.
And also there's so much the rest of the world can learn from India, right? There's a lot that, we can take back. And equally, there may be opportunities for kind of,
Cross-learning.
Cross-learning.
Absolutely, always is. Thank you, Aashti, for some incredible insights based on the work Global Schools Forum has been doing to enable better learning outcomes for all children. Pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure, and really hope that we can continue to kind of collaborate and work together.
Thank you all for watching. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and do join us again next time for another exciting edition as we meet with experts from the education sector who are all working towards creating solutions to ensure better access to high quality learning for all children in India. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to leave your thoughts or suggestions in the comment sections, and do like, subscribe our YouTube page for more such content.